For centuries, we've been told what is pure and what is sinful, what is allowed and what is forbidden. Somewhere along the way, we severed the human from the divine. We silenced intuition, shamed the sacred, and buried ancient wisdom. But here, we remember. Welcome to the Forbidden Fruit Podcast, an exploration of the mystical, the intuitive, the cosmic forces that weave our existence. This is a soulful sanctuary where we embrace the strange and unusual and use it as fuel to reclaim the magic, restore the sacred, and discover ultimate truth. We are luminous, multidimensional beings woven into the vast tapestry of creation, and now, more than ever, we are being called to awaken. For the rebels, wayshowers, and leaders of rising consciousness, this is a space to expand your higher purpose. To the seekers, sensitives, and lovers, this is your sanctuary. Come and share your stories in a space where fierce hearts and fantastical gifts are not only welcomed, but needed. So take a bite. Now is the time to step into your full human potential and embody the divine that you are. You were never meant to be forbidden. Welcome to the Forbidden Fruit Podcast. I'm your host, Jeanette St.Germain, and today we are joined once again by my dear friend and colleague, Catherine Kells. In this episode, we share some of our personal stories of the strange and unusual. So buckle up. It's going to be a fantastic ride. So welcome, Catherine. I'm so happy you're here.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So your story. What do you feel you would like to share about your story? Like, kind of think about that for a moment.
Mm-hmm. So I guess for me, when I remember some of my earliest memories as a kid, how I felt completely different. And I don't know if every kid feels this way, probably. Don't we all? But the idea that like I'm here and I came here to do something different. And that really manifested for me. Like I was always kind of an outsider. I never fit in. Whenever I would have interactions with other kids my age, it would always be like I would take it so personally. And I couldn't figure out why I was different. So fast forward to when I was, I think, 10, and I was sitting at my desk in fourth grade, and we were all getting ready to go on the bus, and I was a walker. So I didn't go on the bus line. So I was sitting there when half the kids in the class were gone. And I remember looking out the window, and all of a sudden, in my 10-year-old self, I look out and like everything fades away. The window's not there anymore. And what I see instead is, and like all the kids around me, they just disappear. And in the moment, I'm like, whatever, this is okay with me. It wasn't like I was close to them.
Bye.
I was like, I was really pulled up, and I didn't think about anything else at the time, but I was pulled out of this situation and everything disappeared. And this was one of my first memories of actually having a vision, which really solidified for me how, at least for the very beginning, I was different. And so what happened is that when everything faded away, this color of red just showed up. And it was this really intense, beautiful color. And I just kept thinking, like, what's going on? Not really caring, not worried, just like, what is this? And then that's when I saw this massive glowing hand coming out from the sky, coming towards me. And it reached into my chest cavity and my heart. And, imagine like, massive glowing hand coming towards you and just being totally calm about it came and it grabbed my heart and it said, "You are loved." And at that moment, I had no care about anything else going on in the world. Nothing mattered. It was just in that moment, feeling that hand, which I come to know as the creator. Like that was creator's hand reaching out to me and saying, "You are loved." Which for me, as a 10-year-old, as much as it possibly can, it completely changed my life. Because in that moment, I realized that I had a different purpose. This type of thing didn't happen to everyone. It wasn't a normal thing where everyone can say, oh, yeah, I've had that experience too. Like, I've never heard anybody have that. And I mean, we each get touched in our own certain different, unique ways of how Creator wants to reveal themselves to you. But for me, that was how it was. And it really anchored in that moment of I'm present, I'm here, I came here for something. And that's what I'm going to do. And no matter what, I have that unconditional support that can never be taken away because that was given to me directly from Creator. And so for me, like every time I have something happen in my life since then, 30 more years since then, and realizing that every single piece of my life has been changed because of that one moment that was probably 30 seconds in real time. And nobody noticed after the fact, like when the room kind of came back into view, nobody seemed to notice that I must have been staring out the window. I don't really know. But it was just everything about my life in that moment changed. And I realized there was so, so much more than what we see on a daily basis. When we walk into a room, we have a conversation with someone, something happens to us, whatever it is. All of those things are so minuscule in the grand scheme of things because no matter what, Creator has your back. You are here to do something so important. And it's not just me. I just got the beautiful, extraordinary opportunity to be able to feel that for just a moment.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Thank you for sharing. Like, I can just imagine your little 10-year-old self sitting there, staring out the window, getting ready to go on a bus that you're not used to normally doing. And just, yeah, like, thank you for sharing that. I have some very similar experiences. So, you're right. I don't think that everybody has these experiences. At the same time, I think we do, right? We have different things. Like you said, we're all touched by the hand of the divine in some way, whether we realize it or not. One of my earliest memories is when I think I was between 3 and 4 years old, and I was waiting for my dad to come pick me up for the weekend. My parents had recently gotten separated, and I was really close with my dad. I missed him terribly. I had all the feelings that I think any child that goes through that experience of their parents getting a divorce or leaving the family, however that plays out, we all, as children, have this experience of, did I do something wrong? Why did my parent leave? And we tend to internalize it because we don't really have a sovereign sense of self at that age of development, right? Our brains aren't even fully developed. So it was one of those nights. I was really missing my dad. And he had promised to come pick up me and my brother for the weekend. And it was the first time I was going to get to see him since he left. And I remember packing my little blue suitcase. It was this fake leather suitcase. And I love to run my hand over the surface of the case. Like I have this visceral memory of touching the suitcase, zipping it up. And I was so proud of myself. Like I packed it myself. And then I go and I sit by the window. And I think he was supposed to come around dusk, around 5 or 6 o'clock. And I'm sitting there waiting by the window on my hands and knees, just waiting. And he didn't come. And quite a few hours go by and I'm waiting and waiting. And it's getting darker and darker. My mom tells my brother and I to go to bed, get in bed. He's not going to come. And she probably put me back to bed 2 or 3 times. And I kept getting back up, kept getting back up. And I think it was probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting there by the window. Everyone else in the house is asleep. And I see these headlights come up the drive. And I got all excited. I thought it must be my dad. And so I jumped up and I ran out the door. And I'm crying, "Daddy, Daddy." and I lunged myself at this pant leg of our neighbor. And it was not my dad, but I didn't realize that at the moment. And I'm crying and I'm screaming, "Daddy!" And he's like, "What the heck?" You know, he just got home from night shift or work or whatever. He totally surprised. This little child is running out, grabbing onto his leg. And then I just remember my mom coming out, being so embarrassed, mortified that her child would do this, inconvenience the neighbor, whatever she was thinking, I don't know. But she pried me off of his leg, apologizing profusely, and then shoos me back in the house, and she was angry. And she was telling me that I shouldn't be waiting. And how could I do that to her? How could I embarrass her? And I just remember feeling so much shame and this sense of abandonment, this sense of betrayal, that the people that are supposed to love you the most and take care of you and look out for you aren't going to do that. And I remember this belief system coming in at a very young age that when I cry, when I have a feeling, my needs aren't going to be met. And I could feel this like shaking in my little body. And I just couldn't believe her. I couldn't believe what she said, that he wasn't going to come, that he didn't love me, that he abandoned our family, that he didn't want us kids. And so I pretended to go back to bed. And as soon as she seemed asleep, I got back out of bed. I'm stubborn to a fault. So I jump out, go back to the window. And at this point, I had pretty much resigned myself to sitting there by the window alone. And I started crying and just holding myself and just feeling the weight of that loneliness and sadness, that feeling of abandonment, and wondering if there was something wrong with me, that why wasn't I lovable? And I couldn't understand why love would leave. And as I'm sitting there shaking and crying, I started to notice this change in the air. I started to hear these little pops and crackles. And you know that moment when your hair stands on end and it's almost like the room is filled with electricity, but there's no lightning present? That moment. And that started to happen. And as I'm looking out the window, again, looking out the window, very interesting, we both had the same little gateway. I notice this energy of light starting to form. And as I watch, it starts coming closer and closer. And I started to get scared. I'm like, what is this thing coming at me? And so I scrambled down from the windowsill area. There was like a little bench you could kind of sit and look out the window. And I scramble over behind the recliner, and I'm hiding and I'm looking, and this ball of light is coming closer and closer. And it was kind of a hazy color at first, kind of like a gray purpley color. And as it got closer, it got lighter and lighter, more bright, more white, more gold. And then there was purple, almost like purple fire, like running through it. And it entered the room right where I had been sitting. And as I was peeking, I just felt this knowing, and in a way heard a voice without hearing the voice. I heard a voice say to me, "Do not fear. You are safe and you are loved." And all of a sudden, all of my fear disappeared. All of my sadness and my feeling of abandonment and betrayal and self-loathing that was coming up in this little child system, it was just gone in an instant. And I felt this energy come towards me, and I stepped out from behind the chair. And I felt this figure wrap its arms around me And I felt this massive wave of light, almost like angel wings coming around, like wings cocooning you, cocooning me. And I let that energy just hold me. It probably was just for a moment. It felt like hours. It felt like the whole rest of the night. And I got to just be held in this energy and rocked. And it was the kind of love that I've never felt with another person. The kind of love that I think I expected my parents to give me, and they would not know how to give that kind of love. It just felt so complete. There was nothing I had to do, nothing I had to be. I was loved simply because I existed. And that energy was there. And I have since had many experiences with that energy and energies similar to that. I can't tell you exactly what that energy was, other than it felt angelic. It felt like what some people might perceive as Jesus. I remember the first time I went into a church and I felt the energy of Christ consciousness. I didn't understand the pictures of Jesus or the imagery on the cross. Like those things actually hurt my system, especially as a child. But the energy of that consciousness was there in some of those places. And that was the energy that I felt come around me when I was a child. And yeah, it's like the hand of God scooping you up and just holding you and reminding you that you are so loved. And so, same as you, I have that same paradigm of I'm here for a reason. I may not know what it is, I may not know why, but I'm here for a reason. And I can sense things, see things, feel things, remember things that others say they don't. So, yeah,
Mhm.
that is my story.
And it's so interesting because I think when you have those experiences as a child, it's like that gateway so that, most people, when they come here, you start out as a baby and all of your gifts are online and you don't know how to explain it, you don't know how to share it. So you start feeling that frustration and you feel that separation of why can't they understand me? Why can't they hear what I'm saying to them?
Yeah.
Why don't they get it? So you start feeling that, and then slowly over the years, you start sinking into that separation feeling, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of the paradigm of this planet and what this experience is here. Um, but when you have those experiences as a child where you get that precious, precious reminder that there's something different out there, it is not just this reality, this wake up, go to work, live your life for the weekend and do it again the next day. That's not life. That's not living. There's so much more. And once, when you have that experience as a child, it really changes who you are. So you can't go back because once you start to feel that awakening and you just get that taste of more, it's like nothing anyone can say or do or anything that happens to you can turn that completely off because there's always that spark that's been awakened in you that remembers, that says, hey, I'm here. And it's so beautiful. Like I've had that, the experience of feeling that full connection a number of different times in my life. Um, but it's like, and it's interesting because when you feel that in that moment, you feel completely connected. Like, right now in my awareness, I feel I have a body, I'm separate, I have a kitty here and a puppy here, and I feel that we're different, if that makes sense. And, if someone came in the room right now, I would be like, oh, okay, you're over there and I'm over here. But when you have that feeling of that oneness, there is no border between you and them. There is no us versus them. All of it is that energy, that feeling. It's truly connected. So you feel that in a way that it's like utter, utter, utter peace. There is nothing more calming, more connecting than that feeling of oneness. And I don't know how else to describe it than that. It doesn't matter what anyone looks like, who they are. how they show up in the world. It's just that feeling of, I see you, I know you. And it's the most beautiful thing in the world.
Yeah, totally. I think that's why we want to do this podcast and why we do the work we do in the holistic wellness field, in evolving consciousness field, in spirituality fields. Because how can we not? It's like the veil has been pulled back and we see that there is no wizard, or we see that we are the wizard, or we're part of this great creation. Like you said, we're not separate. And as a child, having a lot of experiences where there's, abandonment, wounds. I think a lot of us healers and light workers, or whatever we call ourselves, we have that same wound. But it also goes back to the wound of separation from source. When we come and have a human experience, we feel like we're separate. Like you said, it's like there's a dog, there's a cat, there's me. And so when we get that glimpse of that oneness, it reminds us that not only are we still a part of everything that is, but that we can actually make this fun. This can be like a game where we get to experience all these different things through these individualized expressions, and yet we're all still connected. And that's the framework that I've really come to want to explore more, understand deeper within myself, that when people love me, when people hurt me, when I hurt them or love them, like we're all reflections of each other. We're all parts of this same tapestry of life, living, creating, growing, evolving, or choosing not to. Either way, it's all still happening, whether we are conscious of it or not. And these experiences as children or as adults, I mean, oh my gosh, it opens your mindset to so much more. And it makes living our human lives a little bit easier. Maybe just a little bit easier, right?
Sometimes.
It's like we get so caught up in relationships and money and what's my life purpose and do I even like living my life, right? Especially in Western society. So many people are walking around feeling like they're half dead. And when you have these experiences, these gateways and portals of opening to greater truths, in a way, I feel like it keeps me sane when my human experience is trying to drive me crazy.
It would be so easy to get derailed and to forget and to get stuck and caught up in the, this is my experience, whatever it is that's happening in your day, in your life, your week, or whatever, and to just say, oh, isn't, placing all this judgment about what it means, what it is, whatever. But when you have that experience where you feel that oneness, where it touches you, and that experience, like, have you ever had a dream where, you know, when you're in the dream, it feels so incredibly real, and then you wake up and you're like, wait a second, that what I just did was more real and more alive, and I feel it in my bones, like every piece of me is that. And now I wake up and this is real?
Yeah.
No, that what you are calling a dream is my reality. That's what
Yeah.
it's like. Because when you feel that connection and that fully, completely immersed in that unified field of all that is, call it whatever words make sense to you. But when you feel that, you can't let that go because you feel that in every cell of your being, it becomes who you are. And you can't show up in the world separate from that
Yeah.
because that's the real reality.
Yeah. It's ineffable, right? There are so many things that we try to intellectualize or explain so that we can understand and gather all this knowledge. And the further on my path I go, the more I realize I know nothing. I know nothing,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Everything that I think I know is some story or some perspective, something I've created from my lens of reality. And it's beautiful and it's valid in that experience. But at the same time, if I have this quest for ultimate truth, the ultimate truth, at least for me, is being. Being. Allowing myself to be alive, to be who I am as a human being, to be who I am as a multidimensional, infinite consciousness, to be that energy that can navigate different realms and otherworldly experiences, and also do the dishes, pay the taxes, and feed my children, right? We are superhuman when we start to open our awareness to what we might call the supernatural or the paranormal or the metaphysical, right? Those spaces are part of us. It's not separate. I feel like when we tap into our intuition or we have these life-changing experiences where we get a glimpse beyond the veil, we're tapping into the real, right? We're waking up from the dream that this reality is all there is. So I love that you mentioned the dream analogy. Yes, totally resonate with that.
Uh-huh. And it's not something that you can just shut off. Like I remember going to church as a child, and my parents would bring us there, and you had to get dressed up, and it was like, oh, this is the place where God is. This is the rules of how you have to show up and how you have to be. And I know my parents did their best, and that's totally their path, and that's fine. Um, but it always seems so funny because if you have that concept where God is everything, and you're told that your body is your temple and God is within you, but oh, you have to go to this place, you have to do it this way, and there's these rules. And if you want to communicate with God, you have to pray. And there's that implication that it's one way. And what for me is like in realizing and having all of these experiences I've had over the years is that it's absolutely there is no separation. There's no separation of where God is. Your body is your vessel. They got that one right. That's so true. But that's how you communicate. You are the antenna. There isn't a time where, it doesn't matter if you're dressed up, if you're fancy, if you're just in your pajamas in bed or whatever. No matter where you are, you have in every moment, you can communicate with Creator, or Creator communicates directly back with you. You don't need to go talk to someone to get a hold of Creator or to talk to the angels or to talk to anyone who's passed on in this life. Like none of that. There is no separation. They are right there and they can communicate with you. They want to communicate with you because they absolutely love you. And they are just waiting for the very, very first moment where you wake up and say, I hear you.
Yes. Oh, totally. Yes, yes, yes. I remember I remember playing hide and seek with my brother, and I was probably, 8 or 9 age, and I would always hide behind the door in my bedroom, always. And I had this technique of making myself really, really small. I call it ninja mode, right? Making myself small and cloaking my energy field. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I just naturally knew how to do it. I've had all kinds of abilities since I was a small child, and I didn't know that not everybody could do these things. Well, I still believe that they can, they just forgot. That's another conversation. But I'm standing behind the door, playing hide and seek. I'm cloaking myself, making myself really small. And then I decide to go through the wall. Just this random thought that I have. I'm a very creative, imaginative child, but to me, that felt like something I could really do, right? I'm going to go through the wall. I'm going to go into this other dimension and I'm going to talk to the unicorns and the fairies and the werewolves and the vampires and all the fantastical things that I read about in books. And I'm going to make friends with them. And my brother's not going to find me because I'm going to be in another world. And every single time I would do this, I would close my eyes. I would envision myself moving through the wall into this other world. Think of like the Chronicles of Narnia, they go through the wardrobe. I would do that before I ever read Chronicles of Narnia.
That's awesome.
Yeah. When I read that book, I was like, oh my God, I feel so seen. Okay, that's another story. But every time I would do this envisioning practice and go talk to my friends on the other side of the wall, my brother could never find me. I remember him looking directly at me in my eyes as I'm hunkered down behind the door, and he looks right through me. He cannot see me. He would look for me for hours, and I would just be in that one little spot. And then I would eventually come back, and then I'd pop my head out because he'd give up. He had ADHD and still does, so he would like lose focus after 2 seconds, and he'd give up and he'd be playing Legos or doing something else, and I'd come to him and I'd be like, "You never found me." And he's like, "Yes, I looked, I couldn't find you anywhere. Where were you? Where were you?" And so I tell him, I was like right behind the door. I looked right at you. And he's like, "No, you weren't. You weren't there, Jeanette. No, you weren't." And I'm like, what is this craziness that is happening? And this happened multiple times where he could not see me and could not find me. Now, did I literally dematerialize myself? Well, maybe anything's possible. But I believe that I just shifted my frequency. I shifted out of the physical body space, and whatever frequency or realm I was in, he couldn't tap into it. He couldn't see it or even know that it exists because he simply wasn't open to that possibility. And I remember telling him, I just went through the wall and talked to my friends on the other side. "Well, I want to go. Take me with you." And I was like, "No, I can't. They don't like you." That's kind of mean. Like, 8 or 9 years old, he annoyed me. We weren't even a year apart, and I was like in charge of him. Yeah. Has anyone ever tried to be in charge of an 8-year-old ADHD boy? Yeah. Good luck with that.
You're not going to work.
And he's an Aries to boot, right? So he's like, I'm the boss of me and not going to listen to any of all of you. But I love Aries, but I'm just saying. Yeah, it was fascinating. Like, that's one of those experiences where I knew how to go into those other places. I knew how to go into a oneness state without knowing that's what I was doing, and shift out of this physical reality, or bilocate my consciousness at least. So, do you have anything like that?
Um, so I used to think I was probably like about 12, I would think. And I remember at that point, we had moved into a condo, and so I had the basement was my room, and I always thought it was the coolest thing because it was so quiet, it was so dark. So I remember I would have, since I didn't have a lot of friends because I was totally not, socially normal, I was awkward, I was funny, and I didn't really care about other kids at that point. Um, so I remember talking to these voices I would hear, and they were always really friendly. And there was one in specific, and it's funny now, upon retrospect, I'm like, oh, that totally was my guide. All these years, always been the same. There's certain ones, like every once in a while, different ones would come up, and it was like, no, this little friendly voice. It's like, oh, you could call it your imaginary friend, call it whatever you want. They had some good info, and they always kind of seemed to know what was going to happen, and would give you little teeny tidbits here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was always really relevant. So it was like, sure, we'll talk to you. And I'm sure now if I, was a kid, they would label with me with all kinds of different diagnoses, whatever. But it was interesting because, so one thing that for whatever reason, I got this book in the mail from some subscription book service that was like
Mm.
buy 10 books for a penny or something like that, whatever it was called, that was like prominent in the 90s. Um, but anyways, so I got this yoga book and I don't know
Mm.
why I got it. It was just that's what came. So I was looking through it and they would show me different yoga poses and my guides would be like, do that one, do that one. So I would sit there when it's dark out in the basement, no lights, and I would just be doing these random poses. And then my guides would be like, breathe this way and breathe this way.
Mm.
And I realized that like they were actually teaching me different ways of breath work. They were teaching me different ways to flow energy through myself. And there were no words to explain that. It wasn't like I could quick go and like Google, what am I doing?
Yeah.
To describe it. And I didn't have friends to really like socialize, be like, is this something people do? I don't know. It was what I did. And it felt really neat because I could feel that the energy channeling through my chakras, which I
Mm.
didn't know what they were at the time, but I was like, I could feel it hitting different levels. And
Mm.
then it was fascinating because they taught me this way of breathing that when you sit there and you be still and you be so like totally, totally present in the moment, that literally everything sinks away from you and
Mm.
you get that feeling of just floating on a
Yeah.
cloud in this unified field.
Yeah.
They taught me how to connect to the unified field. And
Mm.
I remember seeing and not understanding what was happening in the moment, but I remember seeing, and so my reflection now of what happened was I was sitting as this pearl of energy, this
Mm.
toroidal field. But to me, it just looked like these bubbles. In my 12-year-old version of me, I was like, oh, I'm in a bubble.
Hmm.
This is cool. Floating
Yeah.
here, doing these things, all these other bubbles all around me that manifested as like stars. And I
Yeah.
felt like I would just float all across consciousness. And, nobody could explain to me. And I tried talking to my parents, and they were like, yeah, that doesn't happen. Don't do that.
Hmm.
Like totally writing it off because that was their construct. And that's fine. But it really was just like, oh, okay, this is different. So I learned to not talk about it. I learned to just be quiet.
Mm.
And it was kind of around that point that I realized that I was actually really different than most kids because I would have these conversations with my guys more often than I would have conversations with people. And they became my best friend. And
Mm.
it was so interesting because later on I realized that every once in a while um, this image of this woman would come in and she was probably like 15 or 20 and she had this um I don't know how to describe her hair, but it was really very, very distinct. It was like a bob cut, so clearly not, from this era or 20 years ago when this was happening. And beautiful waves. Like she would come and tell me things and um she would always have something nice to say. She would give me a suggestion like, "Oh, you should go do this." Or, "Wouldn't this be nice?" Just really gentle, really loving things and always had this like motherly feel to her. And I never knew who she was. And she still here and there will come and chat with me. And she always has on these older style clothing. And so fast forward now, this is like 30 some years of having this woman show up periodically. I would feel her. Sometimes I'd see her. Sometimes I would just notice her presence, or I would just get this like hand feeling on my shoulder. And it would be like, oh, hi, I know you. That kind of feeling. And so fast forward now to this is probably 2 or 3 years ago. I was at my grandma's funeral and I am opening up. They had this beautiful display and photo albums of different things. And I turn the page and I see her. This photo of this woman from, exactly as I just had seen her for so many years. And I never knew who she was. And so I asked my mom, I'm like, who is that? Because I've seen her before. And she was my great grandmother.
Oh,
And it was
wow.
so beautiful being able to see in person, like, oh, you've been here. And it was like, thank you. Now I know your name. And just that beautiful experience to know that there's been someone my entire life sitting there helping me, guiding me, and just wants to be there to support me. Like to know that and to know that she's always there. And now I can give her a name.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I have like full body chills. Oh, I love that. Spirit is so amazing. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you to your great grandmother for being there. Oh my gosh. Praising, and so much gratitude to the ancestors. Yes, yes.
Hmm.
My great grandmother, she pretty much raised me until I was about 5 or 6, and then we moved. My mom got remarried, and we moved. But those really formative years, and then we got to see her a lot as well. She passed away when I was 16, and oh, there's a quite a story there. But one of the first times I realized I knew how to move through dimensional spaces through the form of meditation was actually in her hospital room. And she'd gone into the hospital with, she basically fell and broke her hip or something. And she was in the hospital for 2 weeks. She ended up getting blood clots in her legs and having a reaction to some of the medication they gave her. And she went into a coma and passed. And I remember going to see her the day that she passed. And this person in my life was like a second mother to me, right? I was so close with her. And we even had 4 of the same birthmarks on our body. It was like
Wow.
our body maps had this twin energy. It was really interesting. And I have this really pronounced birthmark on my leg, on my right leg, and she had the exact same one. And it's like bigger than a quarter and dark, and just I used to be so embarrassed of it. And then my grandma showed me like I have the same one. So then I thought like, woohoo, I'm like my grandma. But anyway, I was in her hospital room with her, and she's in a coma. And I was sitting there by her bed, and I was just holding her hand. And next thing I knew, I was talking to her in the form of a guided meditation. And I told her to imagine the edge of a lake and seeing my great grandpa in a boat that was coming to her. And I never met my great grandpa. He passed when my mom was young. But I knew that they loved each other very much. And my grandma never remarried. And so I just told her he was there. And I knew I could feel energies in the room. I could feel like there was a portal open to somewhere else. I didn't know all of those things at that time, but I had this sensing of it. And so I closed my eyes and I just started telling her, he's here, he's in the boat. And I guided her through this really beautiful meditation of getting in the boat and going across this calm, peaceful river, getting to the other side and walking through this portal of light. And I told her there were all these animals there to greet her and these beautiful angelic beings to greet her. And of course, my grandpa there holding her, hugging her, holding her hand, and just walked her through this meditation. And at the end of it, I felt her squeeze my hand just very lightly. And I could tell that there was this knowing that she was communicating to me, I need to know that you're going to be okay. Because at the time, my mom and I were not in a good place, and my mom and I had not even spoken for like 6 months. I'd moved in with my dad. We were in a yucky place, me and my mom. And my grandma was afraid to leave because she didn't want it to be bad between me and my mom. And so I remember telling her, Grandma, it's going to be okay. We're going to work this out. It's time for you to go now. And I felt her like wrap around me. I could smell her. It was like that person in the bed, that wasn't the person that I remembered, but that energy of her heart being there. And like you had the hand on the shoulder, like that touch, you can't make that up. And your mind might tell you, this isn't real, there's nothing there, but like that there's something there. And so I did that, and then I got up to leave, and I had to go to work. And within an hour, my mom shows up at my work and takes me out into the parking lot and says that she had passed, like within an hour of doing that meditation. And it was one of the most profound moments of my life. I felt that death portal, that opening to the transformation, to the new beginning that is there in death. And in that moment, my 16-year-old self knew to not be afraid of death. I felt so much love and so much celebration, so much homecoming for her with all these beings. And I knew how much I loved her, but that it was time for her to go on. And that even when she did go on, that hand on the shoulder, right? I knew she'd always be with me. And that I can talk to her whenever I want. And I can go into a meditative state, and I can commune with whatever energy I may need to help me in my life. So I have the grandma, the great grandma connection as well. Wow, it's like so cool that we have some of the similar experiences just showing up in different ways. I love that you're sharing all of this and giving me a safe space to share as well. I've never shared most of these stories with anyone, by the way.
Can I tell you another one?
Sure, yeah.
All right, since we're on the grandma theme. So a couple years ago, when my grandma was getting ready to transition, so she was in her, I think, 90s. She had some health stuff going on, and she lived in California, and we knew it was kind of time was coming near. And so with all the healing and energy work that I do, I kept asking Spirit, what can I do? Because me sitting in Wisconsin, I couldn't go and be there just at a moment's notice. And with family and life and everything, it wasn't going to happen. Not in the time frame that I had, that I could be there. So I just said it out there. I said that prayer. I said, tell me what I can do. How can I help her? And I would, at that point, communication with your guides, they talk to you when it's the right time. Not necessarily when you want to hear, but what you need to know when it's time. So I kept getting this silence, and it was like, okay, I trust that I will be guided in the right moment of exactly what was supposed to happen. And there's that learning that you get from having these experiences with your guides and with the other realms, that you know that it's going to happen whenever it's supposed to happen. So then we fast forward to this, probably a week after I first found out that, okay, this was probably going to be happening soon with my grandma, and she was going to leave this place. And I had the amazing opportunity to actually be able to talk to her through Zoom. So my kids could all say goodbye to her. It was beautiful. And then it was like a night or two after that, then I got the nudge, and I felt that hand on my shoulder. I felt my great grandma, and she was like, okay, this is where you need to come in. And so that was when I felt like, so my grandma had been brought home to my aunt and uncle's house, and I didn't know that was happening in that time because she was at an assisted living, um, getting care. And so I didn't know she had been brought home. So I felt her in my aunt and uncle's home. I felt her laying in the living room, surrounded by all of these people around her. But it wasn't just the people there in that moment. We're talking like 20, 30 people that were not all in the physical in the moment. She was surrounded by angels. She was surrounded by our ancestors. All I was told to do was to just stand there and to bear witness. And seeing this experience happening and the intensity of the light that came as she was breathing, and her breathing was slowing, and as she was in that moment of transition, again, I'm not really like literally there. I'm just having this feeling of her going through this process. And then this massive light just all of a sudden descending on this entire space. And the amount of love and this compassion and connection, and seeing the angels around her, holding her. And then the people that were still in the physical, they faded away out of the scene. And it was just her, and it was angels, and I heard the choir singing, and the love, and like the most beautiful, brightest white that you could ever imagine. Like the white was alive. You know, you look like at a sheet of paper and you think, oh, that's white. Like, no, no, no. This is like glittery. This is moving. This is this plasma web of life and energy surrounding everything in a color so deep that you can't possibly imagine, except in your dreams, because that's your reality. Knowing that there is nothing more real than that particular moment, knowing how humble and how gentle this process was. Like she was, as she took her last breath, she was given that opportunity to just lift and to rise and to be able to see that experience as she went and she crossed through that barrier of that light with peace and that love, and to feel that and to know in that moment for me, that's what I realized my purpose here was, is that hearing that voice that told me as this was happening, we're all just here walking each other home. I never have grasped what that meant ever. You know, like that's the cliche phrase, like, oh, we're just walking each other home. Like, what does that really mean to people? What is that
Yeah.
for real? And to be able to have that opportunity to witness in that moment, that's actually what we're doing. That's why we're here. It's not about Earth. It's not about the day-to-day experiences. It's about that remembrance of who we are. It's about remembering our connection to Creator, to remembering the love, and to knowing that we're all here together, doing the same thing, coming back together, and it's all okay.
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. I could feel chills the whole time you were sharing about her moment of transition and just, oh, thank you. Thank you for allowing us to bear witness to that beautiful moment. And yes, I feel it too, right? These moments that crystallize our life purpose. For me, purpose is about love. The purpose is to love life, to love even the parts that we don't love, to love life. And then I think of a mission, right? I've got purpose on one hand and mission on the other. I think of purpose as the more feminine, the container, this life, this breath that flows and connects all things. And I think of the mission as my individual expression of how I share love and how I am alive in this world. And these moments of touching the divine within ourselves and outside of ourselves, and being privy to these gateways and portals, it's like when you have those moments, it's like nothing else matters. Even though all of our identities and our masks and the different hats we wear in our daily lives, they matter as far as what we're gaining or growing in that actual experience. But with the truth of it all, right? We put so much importance on things that don't really matter, or we place our energy or give our energy to things that aren't helping us to enjoy life or to create something new. And so I don't know, I love sharing these stories because number one, it helps me not feel so alone. And like, I'm so completely different from everyone else and I don't fit anywhere. So I'm with you on that, sister. So thank you for being weird wackadoodle with me.
Anytime.
And then also, I love that idea of these experiences are guiding us into the embodiment of our purpose every single day. There is not a moment wasted. There is not a moment that isn't some part of this divine orchestration. So I know there's so much more we can share. We both have a million stories, I'm sure. But I love just hearing some of this, and I'm so excited to see what comes next. I would like to just thank you for being here and being so open. It is a true joy. And yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you. This is an exciting time to be in.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So we're going to go ahead and wrap up the episode for today. And I'd love to share some more stories next time and maybe go a little deeper into the ascension process, the awakening process, this place of transformation. You and I have both had these experiences since we were kids, but there's a lot of people that are having strange, otherworldly, unexplainable phenomenon right now.
Hmm.
As adults, as children with adults that don't understand, and vice versa. Like everybody on the planet is waking up to the truth that they are more than what they think they are, and that we are part of something so much greater than just what we can perceive in our 3D experience. So I'd like to talk about, yeah, here's these strange and fantastical experiences, but what does that actually look like in a life well lived?
And what do you do with it?
Yeah. How does it help you live your life? I think we've touched on some of that here, of course, but I'd like to dive more into that. How does that sound for you?
Fantastic. Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, yay, I'm so excited. Thank you for
Until
being
next
here.
time.
Yeah, really quickly, if anyone would like to reach out to you and hear more about your stories or just work with you individually, I know that you are helping, or would you like to say what you do if people would like to reach out to you?
Sure. So my focus is working with moms and families with specifically dynamic experiences, special needs, complex family situations, and helping them to heal and grow and come back to themselves and remember who they really wanted to be. Like oftentimes when you're a mom, you have all these plans and dreams of what you want to be, and then life happens and things get derailed, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're upset, you're miserable, life isn't how you wanted it, and you're saying, well, how did all this happen? So what I do is I help you get back to your center and help you to come and remember what you wanted, and then merge that with the reality of what you have and whatever your situation is. And we help you heal and move forward, and you're going to find more joy and more love and compassion in your life than you ever thought possible, even better than your wildest dreams before that. So if you want to
Ooh.
reach me, so if you want to reach me, I am at secondwindquantumhealing.com and I am Catherine Kells. Thanks for having me.
So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm Jeanette St.Germain. You can reach me at JeanetteSt.Germain.com. And I would love to just share so many tips, tools, techniques, and ways of being that help you to remember the divine that you are. My focus is working with leaders of rising consciousness and helping people to develop their intuitive abilities in a way that they get to live life with their superhuman powers intact. So there's a lot to that. But yeah, thank you for being here and diving into these topics with me. I'm so excited to see how forbidden fruit expands. Thank you. Thank you for being here and thank you for listening.